When was Jesus born? With the advent of each new year, the Gregorian calendar we use, like most peoples of the world, reveals its essence. We all remember once again what event the new year was celebrated in honor of and what event the concept of our era originated from. Yes, today, the vast majority of the world's population celebrates the birthday of the prophet Jesus. Peace be upon him. On the eve of this holiday, we consider it appropriate to provide some information about some of the subtleties and historical interpretation of that important event. Every year, on the eve of Christmas, debates about the Star of Bethlehem heat up in many major observatories around the world. The point is that both in Christian religious literature and in Renaissance art, the birth of Jesus, peace be upon him, is associated with an event called the shining of the Star of Bethlehem. Astronomers who approach the problem scientifically are trying to find an answer to one question. Is there any real astronomical event at the basis of the legend about the Star of Bethlehem? If this problem is solved, another major issue, the exact date of birth of Jesus Christ, peace be upon him, will also be solved. This mysterious star is mentioned in only one of the four Gospels, which are considered the main sources of Christianity, the Gospel of Matthew. When Jesus was born in Bethlehem during the reign of King Herod, wise men from the east arrived in Jerusalem saying, "Where is the newborn King of the Jews? We saw his star in the east and have come to worship him." When King Herod heard this, he was troubled, and he called together the chief priests and the scribes of the people, the Torah scribes, and asked them, "Where is the Messiah to be born?" They replied, "In Bethlehem of Judea, for it is written by the prophets, O Bethlehem, you are by no means least among the rulers of the Jews. A ruler will be born to you who will save the Israelites." Then Herod secretly called the priests and learned from them the time of the star's appearance. He sent them to Bethlehem and said, "Go and search diligently for the child. When you have found him, report to me, so that I may go and worship him." The priests listened to the king and went away. The star they had seen in the east went ahead of them, leading the way. Finally, the star stopped over the place where the child was. When the priests saw the star, they were overjoyed. When they entered the place and saw the child with Mary his mother, they bowed down to him and presented him with gifts of gold, frankincense, and myrrh. Having been warned in a dream not to return to Herod, the priests returned to their own country by another route. Matthew 2, 1-12. The city of Bethlehem, Bethlehem, still exists today and is located a little south of Jerusalem. According to the Bible, Bethlehem is the homeland of the expected Messiah, Micah 5:1. The Bible also says that the birth of the Messiah should be announced by the stars, Numbers 24:17. To find the historical origin of the Bethlehem star, it is necessary to look at the event of the adoption of the Gregorian calendar. The Gregorian calendar, in other words, our era, is calculated from the birth of Christ. This calendar was adopted in 533 on the initiative of a Roman monk named Dionysius the Younger. In that year, Dionysius the Younger proposed a new rule for calculating time, taking the year of Jesus' birth as the first year and indicating the dates before that in the opposite way, with a negative count. Dionysius used a lot of contradictory literature in his account. Therefore, It was to be expected that there would be inconsistencies in determining the year of the Lord's Supper and the beginning of the era. Before Dionysius the Younger, another calendar system was used in Rome. They counted from the foundation of Rome. When switching to the Christian calendar, it was necessary to recalculate the old dates and include them in the new calendar. Here, Dionysius made two serious mistakes. First, he did not apply the necessary 0 year between the first year of our era and the first year of our era. Thus, a year was lost in the calendar where the eras met. Now, in astronomical reports, the first year of our era is called 0 year. The year 2 BC is called year -1, and the year 3 BC is called year -2. Dionysius counted the years that fell under the reign of each emperor in Roman history. When calculating the years of the reign of Emperor Augustus, Dionysius made a second mistake. He recorded the reign of Augustus as 27 BC, 14 BC. However, Augustus had been ruling Rome for 4 years earlier, from 31 BC. But at that time, the emperor bore the name Octavian. In 31 BC, Octavian defeated his rivals Antony and Cleopatra VII in the Battle of Actium in Egypt and effectively seized power, for which reason the Senate gave him the name Augustus, holy, after his return from Egypt. By this calculation, the Gregorian calendar, which has been in use since the 6th century, has a 5-year error. This means that the news about the Bethlehem star that shone at the time of the birth of Jesus, PBUH, should be sought not in the first year of our era, but around the year 5 BC. After all, as stated in all the Gospels, Jesus, PBUH, was born during the reign of Herod. The historian Josephus Flavius writes that Herod died shortly after the birth of Jesus, peace be upon him, and the lunar eclipse on the eve of Easter. It was determined that the lunar eclipse occurred on March 13th, 4 BC, and Easter began on April 11th of that year. Historians also date Herod's death to 4 BC. Therefore, Jesus, PBUH, was born no later than March 13th, 4 BC. In the Gospel of Luke, we read that when Mary was pregnant with Jesus, PBUH, Caesar Augustus issued a decree to have a census taken. This was the first census taken during the reign of Quirinius in Syria. Everyone went to be registered at their own city. Joseph, a Galilean from Nazareth, went up to Bethlehem in Judea, the city of David. Gospel of Luke 2, 1-4. Population registrations were regularly held in Roman provinces in order to regulate tax collection. A manuscript found in what is now Turkey during World War II lists and dates several of Augustus's census decrees. The one closest to the birth of Jesus, peace be upon him, dates back to 8 BC. Since communication and transportation throughout the vast empire were primitive at that time, the registration sometimes took 1 or even 2 years. Thus, the 3-year period covering the years 7, 6, and 5 BC should be taken as the most convenient possible interval for the registration of the population mentioned in the Bible. So, what real astronomical event can be identified with the Star of Bethlehem? Here, several hypotheses arise: ball lightning, a meteor flight, a comet, the approach of 2 or 3 planets of the solar system, and finally, a new star explosion. The fact that the star appeared in the sky several times, leading the prophets and guiding them, rejects the explanation of this event by such fleeting phenomena as meteors and ball lightning. It turns out that the Star of Bethlehem refers to either a comet, a planetary approach, or a new star explosion. In recent times, especially in the last 2 decades, research has been conducted around these 3 hypotheses. According to those who present the Bethlehem star as a comet, this is the famous Halley's Comet. Halley's Comet visits the Earth every 76 years. Its approach to our planet occurred in 240 BC, 164 BC, 77 BC, and 12 BC. Each of the above events is described in ancient Chinese sources. Halley's Comet was visible from late August to early November in 12 BC. However, it cannot be identified with the Bethlehem star. 12 BC is too early for the Christian era. In an article published in 1976 by Sheffield University physicist Dr. David Hughes, the hypothesis of a close approach of the planets of the solar system is preferred. In many cases, a planetary approach really becomes an effective sight. Thus, on December 17, 1603, astronomer Johannes Kepler was amazed by the brightness of Jupiter and Saturn, which were extremely close to each other in the night sky, almost merging. According to Kepler, a similar event is described in the Bible. True, Kepler was not the first person to put forward this hypothesis. In the middle of the 19th century, historian G. Luard, while studying the chronicles of the Worcester Monastery, came across an entry dating back to the end of 1285. This year, Saturn and Jupiter, being in the constellation Aquarius, came extremely close to each other. Since the birth of Christ, such an event has not occurred, and according to the confirmation of astrologers, it will not occur for a long time. In general, several planetary conjunctions were recorded in the first 2 decades of our era. At the beginning of 8 BC, 3 planets, Mars, Jupiter, and Saturn, on August 12th, 3 BC, and on June 17th, 2 BC, Venus and Jupiter twice approached. Once every 120 years, a great or triple conjunction of Jupiter and Saturn occurs. The planets approach each other 3 times in just half a year. This event also occurred in 7 BC on May 29th, September 29th, and December 4th. In 1976, after intense reporting, Dr. D. Hughes presented a scenario for the appearance of the Bethlehem star. In the science of astrology, which connects the fate of not only individual people, but even entire countries and peoples with the movement of planets, each star has its own place and function. In ancient times, Jupiter was considered the planet of rulers. In ancient Jewish astrology, Saturn was known as the patron saint of the people of Israel. At this time, the period when Saturn passed through the constellation Pisces was considered more successful. As is clear from the inscriptions on clay tablets belonging to the Assyrian culture, ancient astrologers knew in advance about the triple conjunction of Jupiter and Saturn. The Babylonians could interpret this event as a signal for the birth of a Jewish king and the beginning of a new era. Thus, on May 29th, 7 BC, when the first conjunction of Jupiter and Saturn was observed in Babylon, the priests, believing that the long-awaited event had occurred, headed for Bethlehem, which is mentioned in the Bible. As the priests approached Jerusalem, having traveled several hundred kilometers through the desert for at least 4 months, a second manifestation occurred, September 29th. They considered this event to be a confirmation of the prophecy. Finally, the third Jupiter-Saturn conjunction, December 4th, occurred after the priests met with Herod, showing them the way to Bethlehem. According to modern calculations, for an observer in Jerusalem, the approaching planets were located in the eastern part of the sky, almost at the zenith, which is consistent with what is written in the Gospel of Matthew. The distance between Jerusalem and Bethlehem is 20 kilometers. By the time the priests reached Bethlehem, the baby had already been born. Therefore, the date of Jesus' PBOH birth should be sought between the second and third approaches of Jupiter and Saturn, that is, in October-November of 7 BC. However, according to astronomers David Clark and John Parkinson of the University of London, as well as Richard Stevenson of the University of Newcastle, this interpretation of the Bethlehem star is incorrect. They calculated the parameters of the triple approach in 7 BC and found that during the mentioned event, the planets Jupiter and Saturn did not approach more than 1 degree. This means that at a 1 degree angular separation, a distance of approximately twice the diameter of the Moon appeared between them. It is very unlikely that two planets, well known to ancient astronomers, would be perceived as new stars despite such a large distance between them. Therefore, it is more correct to look for the secret of the Bethlehem star in a new star explosion that occurred about a year and a half after the approach of the planets Jupiter and Saturn. British astronomers, having diligently studied the data of Chinese and Korean sources, clarified that in these sources, for a quarter of a century, 10 BC to 13 AD, only one event with signs of a new star explosion was recorded. The ancient Chinese astronomical treatise History of the Khan Dynasty writes that in the second month of the second year of the reign of Emperor Qianpi, a star appeared in the eastern part of the sky and was observed for 70 days. If we translate the indicated date into the modern calendar, we will get the interval from March 10th to April 7th, 5 BC. The fact that the Chronicle says that this star was inactive once again gives grounds to explain the indicated event not as a comet, but as a new star explosion. The new star, as recorded in the Gospel of Matthew, appeared in the eastern part of the sky before sunrise in the latitude of the city of Jerusalem. Also, according to Korean sources, in the second month of the 54th year of the reign of Emperor Wong, corresponding to the spring of 5 BC, a new star of unusual brightness appeared in the constellation of Aquila. Thus, this event was observed by two groups of astronomers in different countries. The data of both Chinese and Korean scientists coincide in time and are consistent with the information in the Bible. Only one question arises. Why is the fact of a new star explosion not mentioned in Middle Eastern sources? Why was no one interested in the star until the arrival of the priests in Jerusalem? The point is that such facts were not interested in the Middle East. Astronomers living in Judea and Syria, Babylon and Assyria were content only to study the movements of planets, some stars and constellations. These words also apply to Europe of that time. Even when the star explosion that created the famous Crab Nebula occurred in 1054, neither European nor Middle Eastern sources reported on it. Only Chinese and Korean chronicles preserved information about this great event. Thus, the most realistic hypothesis about the Bethlehem star, in our opinion, is the latter. That is, the Bethlehem star was discovered in 1054 BC. The most accurate and realistic option is to identify it with the new star explosion that occurred in the year 5. So, the most accurate date of birth of the great prophet, the Spirit of God, Jesus Christ, peace be upon him, is the spring of the year 5 BC. Finally, we note once again that this date was calculated based on the Bethlehem star incident mentioned in the Gospel of Matthew. If we question the information about the Bethlehem star here, we must examine the birth date of Jesus, peace be upon him, again, this time from the perspective of other criteria and sources.